Welcome to Actions and Limits. My name is Justin Atherton. I'm the Peak Performance Consultant for Confidence Unchained. With me as always is Paul Fortune. Paul is a mindset coach and the founder of A Call to Action. And together, we make Actions and Limits. Welcome to the show, the podcast where we talk about the actions we can take and the limits we create. Another great week, Paul. Everyone out there, make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, whatever your podcast platform that you like to listen on, make sure you hit that button so you don't miss a single episode. Also, check us out on Instagram and Facebook so you stay updated on all our upcoming content. Paul, I'm excited to have our guest come out today. Dr. Bryan Mcelderry is coming out. He's a friend of mine. We've had plenty of conversations. I know we were checking out his content. I'm excited to bring him out, man.
I am too. And you met him on Clubhouse? How'd you meet him?
Yeah, it's on the Clubhouse app. We've been, having different conversations. For anyone that doesn't know how the Clubhouse app works, it's an completely audio app. There's no texting on it, there's no video, it's just all voice, and there's different rooms that get created. One of the rooms that we talk in is the art of effective communication, and I think that one we do on Thursdays. A lot of different people that act as a moderator for the room, they get up there and they start the conversation and invite other people into the conversation to ask questions, to give pieces of advice. And so I found Bryan on there. We've had a lot of great conversations, so I know he's going to bring a lot of value being on the show today. So I'm excited to have him. When you get you on that app, man.
Yeah, well, I got a question about it. So, it's all audio. Mm-hmm. I'm ready to talk, and then somebody talks before me. So I just got to talk quick to get my question in, or how's that work?
Yeah, there's different rooms are run differently. So the moderators do a good job in the different rooms to do it. So say you and I are running a room, and it's like, maybe we have a certain topic that's going on, and people come up to what's called the stage, and we might go, all right, Jeff, go ahead and share what question you have, or if you have a comment. And then, so, Jeff will share. You can see the little apps on who's talking. Everyone has like a picture, a little icon for themselves. And so once Jeff is done sharing, you and I might chime in about it, and then we might move on to the next person, or say, open it up. Well, who else has some comments about what Jeff just shared?
But Jeff can't raise his hand and say, hey, I got something to say. We have to call on Jeff. Is that correct?
In a sense, yes. There's the stage where the speakers are, and then there's the audience, where if you're in the audience, you can't talk. So you have to be invited up to the stage by one of the main moderators of the room. And then now you're up on that stage, and you can turn your mic on and off. Any of the speakers can, anyone that's up on stage. But it's about who's running the room and how they run it. I have been in rooms though, to where people are just trying to talk over each other real quick just so they can chime in and share their story. So a lot of it is based on how well the moderators run the room. And Bryan does an amazing job. He does a really good job running those rooms and kind of reiterating what the room is about, what our mission is for this conversation. And really just controlling the flow of the information and inviting people up to talk and share. It's interesting, man. I mean, whenever you get an iPhone, I'm going to send you that invite. I think you'd really get a lot out of it. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting platform.
It sounds awesome. A lot of people use it, and it's just going to grow. I imagine that it's not going to just be for iPhone for long, because I already hear so many people raving about it. So I got to believe it's going to go mainstream very, very soon.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, and I'll send you that invite just as soon as it does, man, so you can get on there and start hearing all these great conversations. But yeah, Bryan, let's go ahead and bring him out, because like I said, I've had several conversations with him, and he's an amazing guy. So Dr. Bryan Mcelderry, he's a founder of the Shift Mentorship. He says his goal is a holistic life coaching practice is to help high performing professionals and entrepreneurs master their lives and tap into a deeper understanding of themselves. Once this shift happens, you begin to see an immense amount of clarity, calmness, peace, happiness, and fulfillment out of life. This then trickles into an area of your life looking to optimize, whether it be in your business, career, relationships, health, or spirituality. His goal is to fill in this gap and challenge you to be the best version of yourself, to realize your potential is so much more than you think. Well, Bryan, welcome to the show, man. I'm so excited to have you here on the Actions and Limits podcast, brother. So thank you so much for joining us, man.
Man, thank you, Justin and Paul. This is going to be awesome. I'm excited to just have a good conversation with both of you.
Yeah, I know you and I have had several conversations, whether on your podcast, on Clubhouse. So I'm really excited to share your story with the audience. And so give us a little bit of background. I know you started in the pharmacist world, but man, your transition going through, you're in a completely different space now.
Yeah.
How did you get there?
Yeah. So for me personally, I have to always tell people that I'm a Southern boy at heart. It might not sound like it if you're listening or watching, but my voice tone has evolved as my dialect has gotten better. So I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, born and raised in the suburbs of Birmingham. And I tell people all the time, like, people go through their childhood and all those things, but I would say that I just grew up middle class, like blessed. Highly favored from both of my parents being in the household. I have a younger brother named Justin, about 3.5 years younger. And we grew up, not never ever longing for anything, but raised by two parents that were, raised very as hard workers, as people that valued, making sure that you earn what you get. And I say that to say that my hardships didn't come until I actually matriculated through my high school career and into college and undergrad, and then into pharmacy school. But played golf growing up, played all the sports. I actually went to college on golf scholarship, was on the honor rolls and all those different types of things. So my childhood was traumatizing in a different way. And maybe we can get into that a little bit deeper. But I say that, I grew up in a blessed household.
Okay. Well, let's do that. What do you mean that it was traumatizing in a different way? Let's do it.
Let's dive into that. So for most people, they would say, well, where's the hardships? Where's the struggle? Like, how did you, figure out all these things now? And I say that to say that for me, growing up in Birmingham, my parents never wanted us to worry about anything. But as a child, you have questions, right? Your brain and mind is moving around so much that you're wondering, well, how can it be this good? Like, how can I wake up and there be Christmas presents under the tree when there are other kids that don't, right? Like, how is it that we're able to do these things? And that meant that the talk around money or struggle or work, you just checked off boxes, right? Meaning, like, make sure you go to school, make sure you get the good grades. As a result of doing that, you will get into a good college. You'll be able to join all the organizations. And it didn't occur to me until I finished, really kind of during high school, I started to say, well, why did I accumulate all these accolades for what? Because I got the college golf scholarship. I got into Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, majored in chemistry. And I found myself on the campus really starting to question, like, who am I? Like, now we're at an equal playing field, right? We're getting people from all over the world. If anyone's listening is not familiar with Morehouse, I'll just say Google it. Like, we're getting people from all over the world, very highly intelligent people. I'm like, wow, I'm now competing on a different playing field. And what's going to differentiate me from the person next to me that did all the same things that I did? And what separated me from them at that point was to say, well, oh, wow, I've got to find out who I am. And my parents they instilled habits and instilled things, and that you are this person and no one ever can take you away from that. But it was drowned in the accolades and the checking off list of boxes, that I had to discover that for myself. And that's what I tell people leading up to a self-discovery in my early 20s that was hard, because I didn't have anyone to go to really uncover that besides myself.
Well, it sounds like you're a big time overachiever. Is that fire in the belly to want to excel? Is that the reason why you wanted to go after being a pharmacist and get your doctorate?
Great question, Paul. It actually occurred when my grandparents and my parents were not necessarily the best health advocates per se. My grandmother, and I didn't understand the dynamic of a grandfather, because both of them passed away at the age of 50 due to cancer. So I never met them, and I wanted to be a healer, and there were really no healers in my family. My dad was a regional manager for a company named Xerox, if you're familiar. My mom, she wanted to be a lawyer, but she actually, didn't actually get to, see that through, because she had to take over my grandfather's business as a insurance agent. So for me, there was no healers in the family. So I said, okay, well, I'll take on that. I'll be the healer. I'll be the doctor, so I can help my family out. And that's really how it came to be. I enjoyed science. I was good at it, but it wasn't my passion. It was just, oh, well, my deep rooted centered reasoning is I can help my family. And I grew up in a small family. It was just really four of us, and I had some distant cousins. My mom was the only child. My dad only had one older sister that was 6.5 years older. So we didn't have these huge gatherings. So I wanted to be that healer in my family, since there really wasn't any other immediate doctor in the family. So that's the reason I did what I did.
So, okay, now you're a pharmacist and you're doing that work. What happens now?
Yeah. So 2 days before my pharmacy school graduation, my grandmother passes away. The person that I went into this for passes away from, ironically, mismanagement of medications, right? So I say that to say that this was a sign that I was supposed to do something different. And I didn't know what that thing was, but during my matriculation through pharmacy school, I was actually becoming the health advocate for myself and ultimately my family. So I began going into the wellness journey, the fitness journey, just like everyone else during that time. People wanted to be healthy. And I said, well, I'm going to try every single nutritional regimen possible. I'm going to do the veganism. I'm going to do the keto. I'm going to do the macro counting. And as I was doing that, everyone began to ask me questions, right? When you start getting into something that you truly enjoy, they begin asking you questions. So that's really where that began, about the curiosity about how I can become this holistic healer. So I graduate from pharmacy school that summer. I am kind of studying for boards. I'm trying to get my practice in order of being a pharmacist. And I got this 6-figure offer down in Dallas, Texas at a retailer, Target Pharmacy, inside of Target now at CVS. So that's where I was headed. And I remember hiring a business coach about 2 months into me coming down to Dallas, because I'll tell you just transparently, I only had a 12-month stint, really 8 months in pharmacy. And most people are like, oh, wow, like you didn't really do this thing. Like, you made a decision that quick. And it was the instant that my family began becoming ill that I started my first business as a holistic health coach, wellness consultant. And I really began leaning into that. As I was training to be a pharmacist at that location, my business was running at the same time. So that's where that came about, and entering into the practice of pharmacy, which was a very short stint.
So you made that leap of faith of just not doing be a pharmacist anymore, and just going with the holistic healing?
Yeah. To sum it up, Paul, but I mean, to give the people kind of, well, how did you do that? Like, how did that come about? And I say to everyone, when you're thinking about shifting, I made it practical for myself. So as I was studying and, healing people as a pharmacist, I tried to understand, well, where's the breaking point going to be? And that breaking point for me was when the money started to roll in as a wellness coach, began doing speaking engagements at corporations. And that's when the money started to make sense. It wasn't matching the six-figure income, but it was taking care of bare necessities to where I needed more time, right? I had to start turning down things. I had to start saying, I can't because I've got to do this job. And that's when I noticed, okay, well, let me make a goal of setting 3 months of basic necessities that are that I can see as real, and then we can make that leap of faith, because it wasn't perfect, but I needed more time, and you can't get back time, so I had to create more, and that was the decision.
Wow, that's powerful, man. You made that decision early on. I think,
Very early.
yeah, and I think that's a good thing. A lot of
Mhm.
people would mill around with that and let it drag on and go like, well, can I? And like you said, the money difference for a lot of people, that's huge, right? It's like whether it's
Mhm.
half of what you're making, whatever that discrepancy is, you're like, all right, I'm getting my needs met here with this, but it's
Mhm.
definitely not the same living conditions, the same lifestyle. And so making that leap, I give you credit for that, man. That's a tough
Yeah.
thing to do for a lot of people. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah. And go ahead,
no, I wanted to touch on some of the things that you talk about, man. I
please.
really like, you talk about giving your clients, clarity, calmness,
Mhm.
peace, this happiness and fulfillment. It's
Mhm.
that's a lot of different things to work on at the same time. And so, how do you approach that with your clients? Like,
Mhm.
how do you attack that for them and give them all of that?
It comes from a place of pain, man, and
Mhm.
overcoming. I'm not able to do that unless I was very centered in my story. And a piece of the story that I didn't tell you guys, and I'll do it briefly so I can get into actionable steps for people, was that I was in a 7.5 year relationship. And I moved down to Dallas in accompanying that six-figure offer. And I remember when I made that transition, all those things were happening at the same time. I had proposed during that time. So now I had a fiance of 4 months, and I come home one night and all of her stuff is gone. All of her stuff, place is empty. And I'm sitting there wondering, well, why? And I say that to say that's the pivotal point where I transition into life coaching. And to answer your question, Justin and Paul, when I try to teach people to be in this present, calm state around getting clarity about what they want to do, I take them through a process of understanding, well, where are the pivotal hardships in your life, pivotal points where you were confused or wondering why things were happening. Let's focus on those pivotal points, past or current present point, and let's focus in on changing the verbiage that you're using around this hardship.
Mm.
And as we begin to change the verbiage around that hardship or confusion, then we begin coming up with answers that you can actually take action on, or things that you can control. So if you're like, hey, I don't have enough time because of my kids or my family or my job, it's like, okay, well, let's change the questioning around that. Well, where can the time be found? Um, and that will allow them to say, well, actually, it's not the time that's the problem. It's actually your habits and rituals and routines. So how can we instill those to create this calmness and clarity around, actually, you do have more time, and what now can we do in that time to create actually what you want? So for me, it's just like we have talked about, Justin and Paul. I know you're huge on this. If you're associated with Justin, obviously, is changing the questions that we ask to ourselves, and that will bring about clarity. And then it will ultimately see that your story can be powerful. And it takes me through my SVO method of story, value, offer. So once we get clear on the story, change the questioning, then we can begin instilling the lessons or the value out into the world.
So let's go back to your story for a second.
Yeah.
She left you.
Yeah.
You know, you're sitting there going, you're dumbfounded. Like, I thought everything was going well. So
Yeah.
you're in shock. You're in pain. How did you have the tools at that point to get to that point where you're at right now?
Yeah. So during that time span, I was about a year and a half into coaching. That was the full-time entrepreneurship. And as we know, as you're an entrepreneur or a thought leader, it's the best person and the worst for some personal development journey you can go along. So I was already doing and teaching my clients these things, even in the wellness space, how to be clear and calm and, handle hardships. So now the hardship had come upon me. So I remember dropping to my knees and I asked myself that question. I said, you can't control what she just took away from you, but she didn't take everything, right? She only took physical things in the body of her. And I asked myself, what could you have done better, or what can you do now to improve upon this? And of course, I had my healing moments. I had, people that I could talk to and share. And I don't want people to get confused that you have to go on this journey alone, but I could only control me at that point. So I said, I can be a better communicator, because everything was not on her. It was the fact that this goes back to my childhood kind of quote unquote trauma. I only saw my parents just love on each other, right? I saw they got in arguments, of course, but the way my dad and my mom rectified things was just loving more and going out to trips and dates and things like that. So I said, okay, that's how you handle conflict, right? Is you just love more and make up as quickly as possible. And I said, no, you're going to lean into conflict. You're going to have the tough conversations in your clients, with people, wherever you are in the world. You're going to be the best communicator, or you're going to study this art of communication at the highest level. And that's what I committed to for the last 3.5, 4 years. And I went on a 1.5-year celibate journey as well. So I had to start getting very entrenched in who I was. And that meant removing the physical temptation of now the freedom as a man, being very transparent. Men that are listening to this, you're now free. What do you do? Right. And I had to do that for me to get closer to a better version of me and get closer to, for me, a believer in a higher power. And I said, I'm going to remove the physical temptation of women and just the physical body of another person.
That's extreme discipline. Not too many people could to do that. Yeah. What kept you, on that path for 1.5 years, being able to do that? Just focus in on your work, or what?
Yeah. I leaned into other quote unquote vices or temptations, which was reading. So I read a book every single week. So I committed to a book a week. I got very, very keen on my fitness again. So I leaned into my fitness because that hit of adrenaline or this heightened sense of hormonal satisfaction, it can come from other places. We just a lot of times revert just transparently to sex, right? And for me, I had to ignite that other dopamine hit from other wins in my life. So whether that was I poured more into my business, reading, personal development, meditation, fitness, and things just skyrocketed from there because people could see a shift in me. They were wondering what was going on. So that's what I did. And it instilled to this day more discipline than ever before because I'm able to control my decisions better and where those decisions are coming from and if they're the right decisions.
I have a follow-up to that. So after 1.5 years, what happened at that point?
Yeah. So after 1.5 years, I began opening myself up back to the dating scene, right? But it was at a different level at this point because now I knew the definition of boundaries. Now I knew how to communicate better. So currently dating at this moment, I know where to set boundaries for myself because I find myself pulling that loving version of Bryan back into the equation. It's like, no. You've been there before. You know where that is. You've got to communicate now, even though it's going to be difficult. And that's where I have seen the most improvement. And I've seen it even in my clients because I'm able to communicate with them at the highest level about how they can communicate better in their businesses, in their overall lives, in their relationships, which ultimately comes back to the version of them that they see an improvement.
It seems like you created this ultra self-awareness in everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
And man, that's a powerful place to be at, right? When you have complete control over what you do, over the actions you take, the thoughts that you have and which ones you act on. It's definitely an interesting place to be. And how do you get your clients there? How do you push them to that level of awareness?
Yeah. To me personally, I find myself in a tough position because a lot of the times people don't understand that if you're listening to this right now, we're watching it, that everyone has a decision to make. Everyone has a decision. So for me, I try to, quote unquote, in the coaching space, it's called holding space. So a lot of leaders, they want to tell people what to do. And what I've noticed is that through my process, I'm asking better questions. So for example, if someone's listening right now and they're like, well, how do I overcome internal barriers of myself, Bryan, whether I'm anxious about starting a business, I'm anxious about pivoting into the next level of myself, I'm just nervous. And I'll say, well, let's look at this a different way. Let's ask an outcome that you would like to see, and let's work backwards into an offer that you can create for yourself in the world. And it'll remove this anxiousness into this level of bliss for them, because everyone wants this level of bliss or happiness, fulfillment in their lives. So let's hold space for that. And they'll be like, well, actually, like I would love to just be on an island with my family, with my kids, and everyone's smiling, and I'm not worried about my financial situation. I'm like, okay, that's very broad. So let's work backwards in creating that each and every step of the way. And then we find the barriers, and each and every barrier we tackle creates a breakthrough for them. But most people, they work from where they are to where they want to get to. And for me, I like working backwards from the outcome to a offer or presence or stillness that they're in right now. And that allows them to see that, wow, I'm not in a bad place. I'm just not having my eyes on the blissful situation enough times to remind myself that that's possible. So we're just closing the gap. We're filling in the gap space.
I like that idea. How long does it take to work through that process? Is it take a long period of time to be able to, reverse engineer those goals and those spaces that we're trying to put your clients into?
Yeah. So when they come to me, I always give them 3 actionable personality tests that they can go through. If you've not taken a human design test, an Enneagram test, any type of personality test, I like to do those 3. Also a sleep chronotype test. If you're not familiar with Michael Brews, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. 3 of those tests I take, that will give me a starting point to how self-aware they are. And that will allow me to understand where their EQ is. If they're not self-aware, then we've got to start building up that self-awareness and confidence. Then we move to the social awareness of EQ. And then we move to, okay, well, how do you manage yourself as well? And then we move to the relationship management. But everyone wants to jump to the relationships. It's like, I need to handle my job situation. I need to handle this, and I need to handle this. To answer your question, that time span in my container, I usually have a 4-month to 6-month container for them. Now, for some, they're able to handle that in that container, but for others, it might take a full year after our container to actually see that it took me 3 months to just instill the habit, right? Or to start the habit or become aware of the habit that was even wrong. So I put that on the front end for each of my clients, that it's going to be a journey, but when you feel that breakthrough, you'll know, and we'll be there together to capture it.
Yeah. I want to give you this question because Justin goes over this quite a bit, and I want to know your point of view on this. How do you gain confidence?
God, for me personally, how I always answer that question and how I've instilled it in myself is I try to keep it very simplistic, which is if I can keep one simplistic promise to myself that I set for myself every single day, it will have a compounding effect on the bigger vision or that blissfulness that you seek to obtain. So, for example, very simple. If I don't make my bed up every day, if I don't do that, I will start to see a compounding effect of how my day will go. Like I've trained my mind to now see it that I didn't do that. So now I'm flustered throughout the rest of the day. So for somebody else, that's like, oh, that's very, very simple, Bryan. Okay, well, whatever goal that you have, if it's writing a book, if it's starting a business, okay, well, one deposit that you can make every day into the goal, even though you don't see the needle moving, you will actually begin to build up that self-confidence. So for a lot of authors, you might hear them working on their book for 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. It's like, well, did you write every single day? No, I'm waiting for the moment that I get inspired. Well, that's why your confidence is decreasing. Now you can implement this in anything, Paul, like relationships. Well, I don't feel confident, right, in talking to that significant other for my men. I don't feel confident, telling that woman that I still have troubles. Well, are you working on the trouble? So if your finances are lacking and you're not confident in getting to a relationship, well, are you looking at your finance every day to see, well, am I getting comfortable with it to work on it? So if you're comfortable working on your finances as a man and you want to be the provider and the protector, then if you're not looking at it, then when the woman approaches you and they're in your space and you're like, well, I'm not confident yet. I can't get into that yet because I don't think I can. Well, you haven't been looking at your stuff, right? So it's keeping one promise to yourself into the bucket that you want to see improve every day. And that's what's kept me every day. And I can see it. If I don't do that, if I have a goal, I don't do it, I'm not confident in it by the time it comes up. So there's never a perfect time for anything, to start on anything.
How do you keep yourself accountable then?
Yeah, great question. I'm a huge believer. For me, I'm the hardest person. I'm my own hardest advocate or worst advocate for myself, I should say, that I have to find mentors and coaches or just, I'd say, acquaintances of people around me. I'm a huge believer in the 5 people around you. So I have a circle of men. I also have a circle of women, and I have a circle of believers. So I have different concentric circles that are pouring into me. People say, well, I can be hard on myself. I'm the hard. Well, that only is a certain level or threshold that you can grow at. So I realized that I had to get people around me. So my talk consistently around me is a high vibration that I don't see myself going back. People are like, well, would you ever go back to pharmacy or other things? I'm like, I'm vibrating on such a higher level that I don't even know that version of Bryan anymore. Right. So I'm only exponentially going up. So I operate at a certain temperature level. And I'll close it out here with this answer to your question, Paul, is that if you're operating at 70 degrees right now, and we've heard the thermometer reference, but if you're operating at 70 degrees and everyone around you is at 65, and you're the only person in the room that's constantly picking people up, well, I'm a leader. Well, if the people that are following you can only go so far in their leadership or in where you're trying to take them. So I always, if I'm operating at a certain temperature, I try to have people at a certain level below me operating temperature, but I also try to have people at 5, 10, 15 degrees right above me, right? So I don't have people at 20, 30 degrees because it's vibrating at different levels. So I'm trying to work my way up that level to get closer and closer to the version of me that I want to be.
I like all that, Brian. It's so important, and exposing yourself to new groups, new information. I'm glad that you and I get to be together in talks on a semi-regular basis, man. I enjoy that opportunity. But like you said, there's so many different little pods you can create with different people and different energy levels. So it is an amazing thing, and it definitely helps keep you accountable to the message you're putting out there and to what your beliefs and values really are.
Yeah.
One thing you touched on a little bit, you mentioned the different buckets. Now, I've heard different people talk about this idea. So what is your take on the different buckets that you deal with every day?
Yeah. I try to work on 3 different things each day. So I call it, for me, since I'm operating as a business owner, I try to have some personal development time, connection time, and revenue generating operating time. Right.
Okay.
So if I'm not whole and I'm constantly selling every day, you're going to see a depreciation in me. If I'm constantly working on me, then I'm obviously not growing and connecting and making impact in the world. Right. So there has to be this equilibrium or balance or wholeness to it. And that's where I'm able to see in people, like, where I can almost read them, right? And Justin and Paul, like, you're familiar with reading people, obviously. So that's how I'm able to know right where you are potentially. It's like, you're giving a little bit too much over here. I wonder what your home life looks like, right? So I tell people all the time, focus on 3 different pieces each and every day. And there's not a certain, there can be percentages of those buckets that are poured into. So there's some days where I'm like, okay, I need to pour more into the revenue generating operating bucket, right? Or there's time where I take every single quarter, I take a quarterly immersion trip where I'm pouring all into me. A week's time span that I take a solo trip somewhere and I just spend time with me. So that's a big percentage of my bucket that I need for me to have energetic transfer into other people. So the percentages can go.
That's interesting. That the solo trip. Can you give us an example of where you went and what you did?
Yeah. I just went to Zion National Park in Utah. So I flew into Las Vegas, went up to Utah, about a 2.5-hour drive, and stayed up there. But what I do every day is, number one, there's beauty in monotony. History tells us that the best leaders in the world, the most, intellectual people, they have monotonous things they're doing. So Winston Churchill, if you're familiar, if you're watched any movies and stuff, he painted, right? He wasn't a great painter, but he painted. But that monotony allowed him to free himself. So for me, what I like to do is I'll sit in silence and I like to look and people watch. I will begin to just write. Sometimes I will listen to old R&B records. I'm a huge kind of old soul. I remember driving to school in the mornings with my dad, and he would listen to Temptations, and I'll just remind myself of those kind of childhood versions of Bryan and what thoughts come up for me. And if I have a thought that's a breakthrough or a story that I remember, I'll jot it down in my journal. I try to remove myself from connection from others as much as possible and just be present. So I'm talking to, the concierge person at the hotel. I'm asking about themselves, like the human connection. I'll just try to be very centered in. I went on a hike up the mountain. I was talking to people along the hike, like, hey, where are you from? Like, we don't get that a lot because we're constantly trying to capture the moment. So I intentionally try to remove that, still capturing pictures here and there so I can remember it. But I journal, I meditate. And meditation for some is hard, but that just means sitting with yourself and, asking yourself the tough questions. Hey, what do I think about myself? I don't, like, whatever comes to mind. Well, do I believe I'm confident? Yeah, no, I don't know. Right? I don't know. Right? Like, that will start the process of being able to be genuinely curious about you, and you can come back at a better state, in a calm state, to be able to produce at a high level.
Like that. I so want to implement that. And because you talked about it before with me about your immersion trip. And I was like, man, I'm going to implement that because I don't
Yeah.
mind going somewhere by myself. I've had other friends give me crap. Like I'll go to the movies by myself. I'll go eat dinner by myself. I don't have a problem with that. Some people do. But I think that's such a great idea to really, the whole idea, refill your cup. Right. And that self-care. And I liked how when you talked about the different buckets, realizing that, it's going to be different levels every day. For me over the last week, I haven't been feeling well. So I've been pouring into the self-care. I'm stepping away from different things. I'm going to sleep a little extra. I'm not getting up at 4:05 in the morning every day like I usually am. My body needs some rest. So that self-care bucket I've had to, put a little extra effort into. But now I'm getting better. I need to shift over and start dealing with the other one. So I love that idea. And I've heard different people talk about it in different aspects. But Bryan, you're into so many different things. What are your main projects you're working on now? And what is the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, great question. And again, thank you all for having me. I appreciate it. This has been awesome thus far. The main projects I'm working on is getting my book out in a hard copy.
Okay.
Getting my book out in hard copy. People can pre-order it now. I'm pretty sure Justin and Paul have things down in the show notes, but it's called The Purpose Shift: How to Live More Intentionally and Lean into the Best Version of You. And I redefined it because it was supposed to release April of 2020. And I went back to my editor and I said, everything's changed. People's definition of purpose is completely different now, right? And their way of shifting is viewed differently now. So we've got to rearrange some wordings and some chapters to lean into a different whole new society. So that's the biggest thing that I'm trying to get out in Q2. So that's another reason for how important my immersion trips are, is to really identify the level of focus necessary to get that out. Everything else is kind of on autopilot. So my coaching practice is going well. Speaking is going well, all those different things. But to answer your question, the biggest project right now is that.
Awesome. And what's the best way for someone to reach out to you and check out your content and check out what you do?
Yeah. It's at www.bryanmcelderry.com is the best way. My website is very functional, so you can click on different things and see all the things I'm doing, updating it constantly, and also on social at Dr. Mcelderry. That's at DrMCEELDERRY. So just Dr. and then my last name.
Awesome, Bryan. And like you said, all that stuff is going to be down in the show notes for everybody to click on and check you out, man. We'd like to wrap up the show with the title of our podcast in mind, Actions and Limits, and ask these two questions. What would you say is the number one action that people can put into place right now that can make a significant difference in their lives?
Yeah. The number one action, I say, in action, this is going to kind of go against it, but actually inaction and presence and stillness. And I'm so keen on that because action to a lot of people is movement, is doing. And I challenge people to just be for a second. And just like I said before, write down these three stories: the story of now, the story of self, and the story of us. That means, who do you think you are? Who do you want to connect with today? And what calls or impact do you want to make on the world? Those three stories will tell you a lot in that presence and being and stillness. And that is the action that you can actually do right now, today, tomorrow, every day, really.
I like that. I like it. It's just like sitting with yourself in that silence and just like going, what's going on in here? And just listen to that for a minute, right?
Just for a second. That's all it takes.
I like that, Bryan. And the opposite side of this are these, limits that we put on ourselves, these self-imposed limits, which I'm sure you've seen all different types. What have you seen that's the most prevalent limit that people put on themselves that we need to make sure that we remove?
I feel like people don't have any type of belief system. That does not mean a higher power or a universe. That means what values, morals, beliefs standards do you have for you, and will not break for anything for them, because people are constantly pulled in what others are saying. What should I do here? It's like, well, is that in alignment with you and your values? And people's values waver, or they don't have any. So I think, to me, that's the biggest limiting belief or standard that people have, that it's actually restricting them, because they're taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, because they're not firm in who they are and the standards that they set for their life. So constantly going backwards, and it's actually compounding backwards. So I think that's the biggest thing that people can do right now, is set that in place.
I like that. So I'll ask you this: what are your top values?
Yeah. Authenticity, faith, and the last one would be transparency, but that ties into authenticity. And for me, those 3 allows me to see who you truly are, because if those 3 aren't in place, you're constantly get pulled. And faith is, again, if you're struggling with your belief system in a higher power in some way, and you're listening to this like, oh, here he goes with his faith stuff. I just challenge you to believe in something. Like, if you don't believe anything out of yourself, you're constantly thinking that you're immortal. You're just a human being of flesh. So if you don't believe anything outside of yourself, then it's going to be very difficult.
I like that, Bryan. Bryan, it's always a pleasure talking with you, man. I'm looking forward to our continued conversations going forward. Thank you so much for coming on the Actions and Limits podcast, Bryan. It was a pleasure, and I'm sure that everyone watching and listening got some amazing value out of that.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Justin and Paul. This has been absolutely amazing. Appreciate you having me on.
So glad to have Bryan on here, man. Like I said, him and I get to have conversations on a regular basis. We met on that Clubhouse app. So as soon as you get an iPhone, man, I'm sending you an invite, and you can get on that stuff too, man. But I'm glad that he could come on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to get to know him, and I'm hoping to get to know him a little bit more. Loved his energy. You could tell that his coaching business is coming from the heart. Very authentic guy, and I learned a lot that I can implement in my own life.
Yeah, he had a lot of great insight, and you say authentic guy. That he wrapped it up with that being one of his main values, and that resonates with me as well. I think it's too many people are wrapped up in trying to be something that they're not, or fit into some box or category. It's just be you. So that authenticity, like you said, Bryan's a real authentic guy. I think that's important to have. So a lot of great stuff. I look forward to our future conversation. So I hope everyone checks out his content. So let's go ahead and wrap up the show with another segment of Ask Paul Anything. Everyone, make sure to continue to send your questions into the Actions and Limits show at actionsandlimits@gmail.com to get your question featured on the show. This one, Paul, comes from Kevin in Florida, and he says, Paul, what is the weirdest thing you have seen in someone else's home?
Oh, man. Well, a little background, and I used to look at homes, inspect homes for work. Okay. So I've seen some gnarly stuff. And I would say that the weirdest thing that I saw was a remains and a shrine to a turtle. This was a foreclosed home, and they had a shrine and remains of a turtle in their bathroom. So that's the weirdest. I could go weird other stuff, but that's probably the weirdest one I saw.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of interesting things, just like I've seen some interesting things in my career. So I love that one. That's a good one, though. A shrine to a turtle. It was at the shell, and And
Yeah, it was like the shell and the turtle's name and a picture of the turtle and paintings of the turtle. I don't know why they left that, but they did.
So they moved on out and they forgot.
Yeah, the home was foreclosed. The place was empty except for that.
Got it.
In the bathroom. Some of that stuff would be hard to take, but I mean, the remains of the turtle, you could have taken the shell.
Love it. Oh man, I love it. Thank you for sending in your question. That was a good one. I like that. I like. Oh man, another great episode, Paul. Again, glad to have Bryan on the show. Man, another great week, man.
For Justin Atherton, this is Paul Fortune. We'll see you next week.
All right, see you next Monday. Thank you for listening to the show. Don't miss an episode. Click and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform and find us on Instagram and Facebook under Actions and Limits to stay updated on all our upcoming content. Continue to email the show at actionsandlimits@gmail.com for our segment Ask Paul Anything. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.